There was a person who died, and no one came to the funeral. No one remembered the death anniversary. No one carved a name on the grave. And then, that person came back, through a burning hand. This isn't a ghost story meant to scare you. It's the unfolding journey of a man who works in grave relocation, who accidentally unearthed a buried injustice. A soul who had never been called by their real name. The dead cannot speak, but they still touch this world, through breath, through haunting moments, through dreams, and if you're quiet enough, you might just hear their sighs from beneath the ground. This story begins with an unmarked grave, and a blind mother who touched a burning hand. Join me from the beginning, to understand why some deaths never truly end. That afternoon, the sun was blazing hot as Tuan turned his car onto a red dirt road, overgrown with wild grass and trees crowding both sides. A man in his 50s named Hoy was waiting by the gate of an old, rusted, tin-roofed house. As soon as he saw Tuan, he called out, "This is the land I wanted you to see. There are a few old graves in the backyard. I'd like you to perform a proper exhumation ceremony so I can sell the land." Tuan stepped out of the car, carrying his usual cloth bag of ritual tools and a pen for documents. He nodded politely and walked around to the back garden. The plot was about 3,000 square meters, with knee-high weeds and scattered mounds of earth rising from the overgrowth. Hoy followed close behind, pointing as he explained, 3 graves in total. The 2 on the left belong to my grandparents. The other one, well, we're not sure whose it is. It's been there since I was a kid. Folks in the neighborhood say it's an abandoned grave. Tuan walked closer to the nameless grave. No headstone, no incense, just a rounded mound of earth covered in moss and fallen leaves. He paused, looked carefully, then asked, "So no one's touched it all this time?" Hoy frowned, lowering his voice. "Someone tried digging it up once, but after just a few shovel hits, he slipped and broke his arm. No one dared go near it after that. But now I want to sell the land. I can't just leave it there. Take a look. If it's doable, take care of it with the others. I'll pay you well." Tuan didn't answer right away. He slowly circled the grave, examining it carefully, then pulled a stick of incense from his pocket and gently placed it into the soil. There wasn't much wind, but the incense wavered, swayed, then suddenly went out. Tuan furrowed his brow, but remained composed. He turned back and said, "I'll take a closer look, but I'll need a list of relatives for the other 2 graves. And if you can, ask around. See if anyone knows more about this unknown grave. It's best we do this properly." That evening, after returning home, Tuan set his ritual bag on the table and walked into his mother's room. His mother, Mrs. Tu, was sitting and knitting, as always, even though she had been blind since she was 17. She often said, "My hands need something to do at night, or I can't sleep well." Tuan sat beside her and began recounting the events of the morning. The moment he mentioned the unmarked grave, Mrs. Tu paused. Her face softened, like she was listening to something far away. After a moment, she whispered, "That land, someone is calling from it. The voice is so cold. My son, I can't see it, but I can hear it. It doesn't want to be taken." Tuan chuckled. "You're being vague again, Mom. Probably just the heat getting to me while I was telling you. Graves have to be moved so the land is clean, and the living can rest easy." But Mrs. Tu didn't smile. She just sighed. "Land holds both the living and the dead. But some places, the dead haven't let go. Remember what I said. If something feels off, don't do it. I've never forbidden your work. But I am afraid." Tuan went silent. His mother had never objected to his career in grave relocation. She wasn't superstitious, but occasionally, she had strange intuitions, like the time she told him not to take that bus trip home last year. Later, he found out that bus had crashed. He didn't want to believe it, but couldn't fully ignore it either. The next morning, Tuan returned to the property. He brought along a compass, a magnetic field meter, and some tools. As he passed the nameless grave, he felt like the ground beneath him was unusually soft. He knelt, scooped up a handful of soil. It was damp, with a sharp, pungent smell. What startled him was this: in that soil were bits of scorched fabric, blackened like ash, something you'd never expect in an old, abandoned grave. Tuan placed the handful of dirt into his cloth bag and took it home to examine further. The moment he stepped through the door, Mrs. Tu, who was sitting in the kitchen, suddenly turned toward him. Even though she couldn't see, she asked quickly, "What did you bring home? There's a strange smell." "It's cold." Tuan tried to downplay it. "Just a bit of soil to test." "Mom." Mrs. Tu walked over, her hand searching through the air until it touched the cloth bag. The moment her fingers brushed it, she screamed, "Oh my God, get rid of it. It touched me. It's burning, burning hot, like someone's hand on fire." She collapsed to the floor, her body trembling. Tuan panicked and carried her to the bed. All that night, she drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling the same words over and over. "Don't take it away, don't move me from the earth, don't." Tuan sat beside her, watching his mother. For the first time in his life, he was afraid, not of ghosts, but of something real, something silent, but persistent, buried beneath that soil. This time, he didn't go alone. Tuan brought along Mr. Hai though, an old man who used to work as a spiritual medium. Though he had retired years ago and only accepted requests from those he truly trusted. Tuan wasn't one to blindly believe in the supernatural. But after seeing his mother suffer through a feverish trance the night before, mumbling strange words, he couldn't just ignore it. The moment Mr. Hai stepped through the gate, he frowned and patted Tuan on the shoulder, speaking softly, "This place, the yin energy is heavy, but not from ordinary death. Something's trapped here, unable to leave." Tuan glanced at Mr. Hoi, who was approaching, gave a brief nod, and the three of them stepped into the yard. Mr. Hoi's wife brought out some water and politely said, "We asked Uncle though to come take a look. Just to be safe. We're worried. That unmarked grave, people might talk." Mr. Hai didn't say much. He silently carried a bundle of incense, a small comb, and a glass cup. When they reached the gravesite, he knelt before the nameless mound, lit the incense, and gently stroked the earth. His face tightened, and his hands began to tremble. After a moment, he asked quietly, "Has anyone tried disturbing this grave before?" Hoi hesitated, flustered. "No, well, yes, over 10 years ago. Someone tried digging a little and then got into an accident. Since then, no one's dared to touch it." Mr. Hai didn't respond. He closed his eyes, placed a hand on the earth, and began murmuring inaudible phrases. Tuan stood still. The soft sunlight filtering through the hibiscus trees gave the place a strangely gloomy tint. Suddenly, the water in Mr. Hai's glass started to ripple gently. He opened his eyes and looked at Tuan, voice low. "Something is bound here. This isn't just a lost spirit. It could be someone who died in agony, someone who couldn't move on." A chill ran down Tuan's spine. He recalled how his mother, the night before, had said, "It touched me. Burning. Like a flaming hand. Don't take me away." That entire day, Tuan didn't touch the site again. He wheeled his bike out and returned home. When he arrived, his mother was awake, but pale and noticeably weak. Tuan helped her sit up and gently wiped her forehead. She grabbed his hand and whispered, "Don't take it away. It'll drag me with it." Tuan asked quietly, "What did you see, Mom? What did you dream?" She didn't answer right away. After a long pause, she said, "Someone stood in front of me. Long hair, cracked skin, eyes like burning coal." She cried, but no tears came. She said not to let anyone touch her grave, not to move her. I heard it like a plea. Tuan gripped his mother's hand. This wasn't about superstition anymore. Her instincts had never been wrong. He decided to return to the village once more, not to survey the grave, but to ask the locals. The village was small, Only about 20 households. He stopped by a drink stand near the entrance, where old lady Tam, now over 70, sold sweet soup. She looked at him and asked, "You're the one who came to check the grave the other day, aren't you?" Tuan nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I wanted to ask you something. You've lived here long. Do you know whose grave that is?" Ba Tam sighed, her eyes dimming. "Why dig up old sorrow? There's a reason no one goes near that spot. Long ago, a girl named Hong, poor thing, she was mentally ill, used to wander the streets. People said someone took advantage of her, then abandoned her. One day, a hut in the orchard caught fire, burned to the ground. No one ever found a body. Later, the landowner's family built a mound right there. No marker, no name, no offerings either. Folks around here are afraid. People walking by at night say they hear crying. Believe it or not, that's up to you. But I'm telling you, leave it alone." Tuan left feeling heavy. He wasn't afraid of ghosts, but he feared doing wrong by the dead. On the way back, he stopped by a small monkey bridge crossing a dry creek. Sitting there, he kept thinking about what his mother, Mr. Hai though, and Ba Tam had said. Maybe that grave belonged to Hong. Maybe her death held some buried truth. If so, this wasn't just a ritual anymore. It was touching a story long forgotten. A wrongful death never brought to light. That night, Tuan couldn't sleep. He began gathering his ceremonial tools, planning to speak with Mr. Hoi in the morning. But around midnight, in a brief nap, he dreamed of a rotting hut, flames leaping high, and screams echoing from within. He ran toward it, but his feet sank, unable to lift. A scorched figure emerged from the fire, face blurred, but the eyes stared wide and unblinking. And a hand reached toward him. A voice, like wind howling through trees, said, "Don't move me, your mother won't survive." Tuan jolted awake, his shirt soaked in sweat. The room was dark. The only sound was his mother's soft coughing in the next room. He stepped outside and sat on the stone bench, heart in turmoil. This wasn't just about an anonymous grave or land clearance. It was a buried memory, a story lost beneath the soil. And he, a man who digs up the dead, had unknowingly uncovered it. Early the next morning, Tuan sat silently at the dining table, staring at his bowl of rice without touching it. His mother, Mrs. Tu, gently tapped his shoulder with her chopsticks, her voice raspy. "So, what will you do? I'm still afraid of all this, but I trust you'll make the right choice." Tuan stayed quiet. After a moment, he sighed. "I want to learn more about Hong. I think you're right, Mom. Just because there's land doesn't mean we have the right to dig it up, especially when the one buried still has something left unsaid." Mrs. Tu gave a faint nod, as if a weight had been lifted, but the worry in her eyes didn't fade. That morning, Tuan went to a nearby print shop to request a cadastral map of the property, then headed to the old local office that handled land records. An older officer looked over the map and frowned. "The grave you mentioned, it's on the edge of what used to be an old zoning area. But more than 10 years ago, someone reported a fire in that spot. Hold on, let me check the old records." He flipped through a stack of faded documents and pulled out a yellowed sheet. "Here, it says, abandoned hut fire. No body found." The report was filed by Nguyen Van Hoy. Tuan froze, reading the name again. It was him, the same Mr. Hoi who had asked Tuan to perform the ritual. Leaving the office, Tuan's head buzzed. On the way home, he stopped at a small tea shop and called Mr. Hoi. "Uncle Hoi, do you remember the hut fire from back then? I have to ask, did the girl named Hong have any connection to your family?" The line went silent for a few seconds. Then Mr. Hoi answered slowly. "I was just a worker for the former landowners. That hut was for the hired help. Hong had only just moved in when the fire happened. I don't know what really happened. The owners didn't want anyone talking about it." Tuan's voice tightened. "But you called me to relocate a grave. That's exactly where that hut burned down. If you're not sure who's buried there, then how can you be sure it's right to dig it up?" Mr. Hoy exhaled. I know. But if we don't move it, potential buyers keep asking questions. My family needs to sell the land to send my son overseas for training. If you can help, great. If not, I understand. Tuan ended the call, his heart heavy. Back at home, he opened the cloth bag containing the soil he'd taken earlier, planning to dispose of it. But when he turned, his mother was already standing behind him. She spoke quietly. Just now, I saw her again, standing at the door. Hair tangled, clothes torn, her hands black and scorched. She said, "Mom, it hurts so much. Please don't let them dig me up." Tuan didn't say a word. He closed the bag tightly, carried it out back, dug a small hole, placed the soil inside, and covered it. Then he lit a single incense stick, bowed 3 times, and whispered, "If there's truly something left unsaid, please show me. I don't want to make another mistake." That night, Tuan's house was unusually quiet. Mrs. Tu went to bed earlier than usual. Tuan tossed and turned until nearly dawn before falling into a restless sleep. In his dream, he saw his mother standing in a field, holding a basket from which smoke rose. A young girl came running from afar, tears streaming down her face, crying out, "Mom, Mom, don't send me away, it's so cold. Mom." Tuan jolted awake, his heart pounding. The distant crow of a rooster echoed as the first light of day filtered through the window. He knew then, he didn't have much time. He had to uncover the truth before someone else was taken next. That afternoon, Tuan rode his bike to Mr. Hoy's house again, bringing some fruit and a bunch of ripe bananas to offer as a temporary tribute. As soon as Mr. Hoy saw him, he said, "I thought you gave up. We scraped together a bit more money, please. Just make sure it's done properly." Tuan nodded without saying much, as he arranged the offerings under the old cashew tree in the yard. Mr. Hoy's wife came out and pointed to a shaded corner. "This spot has just the right amount of sun. The elders used to hold rituals right there." Tuan nodded and began setting up. While he was placing the offerings, a few curious neighbors came over and stood around to watch. In the middle of the small crowd, Tuan suddenly noticed a woman standing at the edge of the grass. She wore a conical hat and a dark purple al-baba, with long hair flowing over her shoulders. Her face wasn't clear. She stood completely still, just staring toward the unmarked grave. Tuan glanced her way, thinking he'd go over and greet her later, but when he turned back, she was gone. He asked Mr. Hoy, "Was there a woman in purple earlier? Wearing a hat? I saw her near the edge of the garden." Mr. Hoy shook his head. "Didn't see anyone like that. Just a few of the neighborhood ladies, none of them wore purple." A chill crept through Tuan, but he said nothing more. Back at home, Mrs. Tu felt something strange too. That afternoon, as she shelled peanuts, she suddenly stopped, reaching one hand to the back of her neck and whispering, "Cold, like someone's standing behind me." She made her way to the door, but no one was there. Yet the icy feeling clinging to the back of her neck wouldn't go away. Night fell. Tuan returned home, exhausted after the ritual. While eating dinner with his mother, she asked, "Did any strangers show up today? My heart's been uneasy. Feels like someone came, but no one invited them." Tuan told her about the woman in purple standing in the distance. Mrs. Tu slowly nodded. She came back, but she wasn't glad. When the dead are disturbed, especially without permission, they get angry, especially if they haven't found peace. That night, Tuan dreamed he was standing in a field of grass. A woman in a purple blouse approached him. Her face was still unclear, but her hands were blackened, cracked like burned flesh. She reached out and whispered, "Don't let them take me. I haven't finished speaking. Something of mine is still hidden." Tuan jolted awake, heart pounding. The sky was still dark, wind slipping coldly through the cracks in the door. He sat up, hands trembling as he reached for his phone. In that moment, he knew, if the truth wasn't uncovered soon, someone else would be left restless. And this time, it could be him. The next morning, Tuan visited the village chief's house, an old man in his 70s named Tu Phuoc, who had lived in the village since his youth. Mr. Phuoc sat on a wobbly rattan chair, leaning on a cane, eyes narrowing as he studied Tuan. "You're the one checking the grave at Mr. Hoy's place, aren't you? Asking about Hong?" Tuan nodded politely. "Yes, sir. I just want to understand better, so I don't make a mistake with the dead." Mr. Phuoc furrowed his brow, his voice low and steady. "That girl, no one in the village ever hated her. She was pitiful, orphaned young, worked as a laborer for the landowner. But from what we heard, there was something going on with the eldest son. Then one day, the hut caught fire. After that, no one asked. No one looked. They raised a mound and that was that." Tuan sat in silence. Each person held a piece of the puzzle, and now he was slowly fitting them together. Mr. Phuoc sighed. "I remember one day, that son got kicked out by his father for a while. Then he came back like nothing had happened. The elders back then kept their mouths shut. But the villagers whispered. Everyone knew. No one dared say it. That afternoon, Tuan stopped by the pharmacy near the market. There, he met Bitch, a woman who had once worked alongside Hong. She was in her 40s now, soft-spoken but sharp-eyed. When Tuan mentioned Hong's name, she hesitated. "I haven't spoken about her in years. But back then, we worked the fields together. She was gentle, quiet, but one day, her face was bruised. I asked her what happened, she just cried. Then she vanished. A few days later, we heard about the hut fire. I walked by and still smelled something, like burned hair." Tuan thanked her and headed home, his mind spinning. That night, he sat down and wrote out every detail he'd gathered. A laborer, pregnant, abandoned, hut burned down, no body found, and now, an unmarked grave sitting right on top of where that hut used to be. It all matched too well. Late that night, he sprang up and, for the first time, opened his phone to search cemetery laws and the conditions for relocating unidentified graves. Every line he read felt like it was squeezing his chest. Not because of the legal steps, but because he knew, if he dug it up, the truth would come out. But if he didn't, the injustice would remain buried forever. He stepped into his mother's room. Mrs. Tu sat in the dark, awake, as if waiting. She asked softly, "You really plan to move her?" Tuan answered, "I don't think I have any other choice. But I want to know for sure before I do." She nodded and reached into her shirt pocket, pulling out a small, old cloth pouch, smelling faintly of medicinal herbs. "This is a calming sachet I've kept for those who can't rest. Take it with you. If you feel a chill down your back while you're there, stop. If the dead make your living hands tremble, it's not time yet." The next morning, Tuan met with Mr. Hoy again. This time, he brought a map of the grave's location, witness statements from the villagers, and a recording of Bitch's testimony. Tuan placed everything on the table and spoke slowly. "I understand you want the ritual done. But if I dig and find Hong's body, with no ID, no family, and signs she was harmed, I'll have to report it to the police. Are you ready for that?" Mr. Hoy's hands shook, his lips stammering. "Are you threatening me? I just want to sell the land. What happened back then? I wasn't involved." Tuan looked him straight in the eye. "No one's asking whether you were involved. But the dead are waiting for someone to speak the truth. You don't have to confess. But don't stop me from doing what's right." That night, as Tuan drifted into sleep, he saw the woman in purple again, standing in the middle of the old burned hut. Flames crackled softly around her feet. But this time, she didn't reach out. She just stared at him, eyes full of tears, then turned and slowly walked toward the old cemetery. A voice whispered through the wind, "If you want to see me, come on my death anniversary, the 17th, next month." A week later, Tuan marked the date in his notebook. The 17th, next month, her words kept repeating in his mind. But what puzzled him was this. No one knew exactly when Hong had died. There was no death certificate, no body, no funeral. Tuan brought the matter up with Ba Tam. She paused for a long moment, then said, "I remember people in the village whispering that the fire happened on the 16th day of the 6th lunar month. But everyone avoided mentioning it. How did you know that day?" Tuan replied vaguely. "I dreamed of her. That's what she told me." Ba Tam shivered. "Then it's probably right. Be careful when that day comes." On the evening of the 16th, Tuan packed some rice cakes, incense, and candles, then rode his bike to the plot of land. He didn't call Mr. Hoy. He didn't tell anyone. He went alone. The sunlight faded gradually. The garden was still, overgrown grass brushing against his pants. He scattered rice and salt around the grave, lit 3 sticks of incense, and sat cross-legged in front of it. Silence. Wind rustled through the bamboo, the leaves whispering as if someone were speaking. Tuan closed his eyes, breathing deeply. As dusk turned to night, he heard a soft sigh behind him. It wasn't loud, not frightening, just as if someone had quietly sat down. He didn't turn around. He simply spoke aloud. "I'm here. If there's anything you want to say, I will listen." No words came in reply, but the incense suddenly bent downward, curling as thick smoke rose. Within the smoke, Tuan glimpsed the faint figure of a woman in a purple blouse standing beneath the cashew tree. Her face was still hidden, only her long hair and darkened hands visible. He said nothing more, only bowed his head. A moment later, the wind picked up, the smoke thinned, the figure vanished. When he returned home, his mother was already sitting, waiting. She didn't look at him when she asked, "You went there, didn't you? Did she say anything?" Tuan shook his head. "She only stood there. But I understand now. She doesn't want pity. She just wants to be remembered. That day, once a year. If someone lights her a stick of incense, maybe that's enough." Mrs. Tu pulled a faded, reddish-brown hair tie from her pocket. "Back when I could still see. I found this near the edge of the garden. I didn't know whose it was then. But now, I think it was hers. Keep it. Maybe it'll help her not be forgotten." Tuan took it. The fabric still felt faintly warm. He placed it in a small wooden box, set it on the altar beside a nameless photo frame. No face, no name, just a plain white cloth draped across the wood. That night, he didn't dream, but something inside him felt lighter. As if, for the first time in years, someone out there had finally found peace. Tuan sat in a small cafe near the bus station, the same place where his mother used to sell lottery tickets, where she once brought him as a child. Suddenly, he wanted to reach back, to touch something from the past, that feeling of not being forgotten. He opened his notebook and flipped through the pages he had written about Hong. Every line, every shaky stroke of the pen, had been written in a state of emotional turmoil. Beside his now cold cup of coffee, an old lottery ticket seller walked by and rasped, "Buy one, will you? Business is terrible today." Tuan smiled, took the first ticket, and gently asked, "How long have you lived here, ma'am?" "Ever heard of someone named Hong, a young woman who worked as a helper? Passed away in a fire long ago?" The old woman furrowed her brow and repeated, "Hong, which Hong?" "Oh, the girl who always wore brown, with long hair, right? I remember now. She used to buy sticky rice dumplings every morning at the market gate. She had the kindest smile. Then one day, I heard her hut burned down. People said she disappeared, but I think she died. And everyone just stayed quiet. No one talked." Tuan slowly jotted down her words. Fragments of memory, they didn't need to be perfect. Just having someone who remembered was enough. That evening, he went home and took the empty picture frame his mother had placed on the altar. For the first time, Tuan sat before it and spoke as if to a real person. "If you were still alive, you'd probably be about the same age as my mom. If someone had stopped the fire that day, if someone had stepped in, maybe you would have been just a normal woman, with a family, with children. But no one said a word. No one even kept your name. So now, I want to ask you one thing. Allow me to engrave your name on a headstone. That's all." That night, Tuan couldn't sleep. He rummaged through old records, made a few calls, asked around for Hong's full name. No one remembered her last name. They only knew her as Hong. But that was enough. Early the next morning, he went to order a small stone marker. On it, just a few words were carved. Nguyen Thi Hong, a young woman who never had the chance to live a full life. The next afternoon, it drizzled softly. Tuan wore a raincoat and carried the headstone alone to the old plot. The grave was still there, now overgrown with fresh green grass. He knelt, wiped away the dirt gently, and placed the stone down with care. No incense, no candles, just a single white lily. He sat there, soaked through, but not cold. In the breeze, Tuan thought he heard the faintest exhale behind him. He couldn't be sure, but he didn't need to be. All that mattered was that now, on that once forgotten patch of earth, there was a name finally spoken right. And maybe, just maybe, a soul no longer wandered. It was a cloudy Sunday morning. As if rain was coming, Tuan tidied the altar, gently wiped down Hong's photo frame, and lit an incense stick. His mother, Mrs. Tu, sat on the porch, slowly knitting a scarf. As her hands moved, she murmured, "I feel lighter now. Our house isn't as bone cold as it was those past months. Last night, I even heard a rooster crow, first time in a long while." Tuan stood up, poured a cup of tea, and sat beside her. He smiled softly. "Maybe it's because you believe. The dead, too, need their name to be spoken." She was quiet for a while, then said calmly, "But don't think it's over just because something feels finished. Sometimes, what's buried deepest isn't in the ground." That afternoon, Tuan picked up the old handful of soil he'd once brought back from the Nameless grave, now sealed inside a small glass jar on his shelf. He meant to scatter it in the backyard, as a way of returning it, but the moment he opened the lid, a cold draft brushed past him. Even though the air was still, Tuan froze. Before he could close it again, he heard his mother scream from the kitchen. He rushed in to find her collapsed on the floor, hands over her face, unable to speak. After a few minutes of trembling, she finally uttered, "There was a hand, a burned hand. It touched me, told me not to take it away from the earth again." Tuan stood frozen. He carried his mother to bed, covered her with a blanket, then returned to the jar. For a brief second, he thought he saw a wisp of smoke dissolve into the air, and a damp, ashen smell gripped his throat. He took the jar and buried it again, this time under the old cashew tree, the very place where Mr. Hai Tho had first stood and prayed. That night, the house was still. Tuan didn't turn on the lights. He sat in the middle room, hands resting on the table, quietly watching the soft yellow glow filtering through the curtains. Near midnight, Mrs. Tu opened her door and slowly felt her way out. She didn't speak. She went straight to the altar, lit 3 sticks of incense, and gently placed them down. Then she turned and said, "She came, but she didn't come inside. She stood beyond the fence." I heard her sigh. She said she's at peace now, but she's afraid that one day people will forget her again. Tuan's throat tightened. He stepped into the yard and looked toward the cashew tree. The wind stirred gently. No one was there, but on the old brick fence, a fresh scorch mark had appeared, small and round, like the tip of a human finger. The next morning, Tuan added one more line beneath the headstone. "I'm sorry it took so long. But from now on, you won't be nameless." Some people leave this world in silence, their names scattered like dust across the earth. Some spirits don't need incense every day, just one living soul who remembers them, who speaks their name, and that is enough. And some pain doesn't need revenge, just to be heard, to be acknowledged, and it transforms into peace. The story of Hong, the nameless girl in the forgotten field, had come to an end. But a larger question remained. How many lives like hers are still waiting to be remembered? Waiting to be named, waiting for someone to pause long enough to hear them sigh? If you've ever walked past a grave without a name, please don't call it abandoned. Because once, it may have been someone's life. If you found this story meaningful, please consider subscribing to the channel and joining me on future journeys, as we uncover the forgotten and give voice to the unheard. Thank you, and see you again.